This film recap starts with a miniature model of a beautiful town named Holland, situated in Michigan. As the town residents line up to take pictures dressed up as farmers, we are introduced to the protagonist, Nancy Vandergrift. She's a middle-class housewife and teacher who loves the charming and safe small-town life. Back at her house, Nancy is seen unloading a box of random things on her bed as she frantically searches for a lost earring. She starts interrogating her son's babysitter named Candy, thinking that she has stolen the earring. Instead, Candy confesses that she secretly ate some of the family's bacon. Candy leaves feeling embarrassed, while Nancy grows hopeless about finding her missing earring. Here, we see Nancy's 13-year-old son Harry, who gets upset that his mother sent away his favorite babysitter. The boy storms upstairs and calls his father, Fred Vandergrift, who is an optometrist working at his local clinic. Fred reassures the young boy and comes home later to greet Nancy, who is busy making meatloaf for dinner. Fred's calm and charming disposition makes Nancy smile. He calls Harry downstairs, and the father-son duo go out into the shed to work on their miniature model of Holland. This is special bonding time for the father and son, and Fred makes sure to help Harry feel better about the fight he had earlier with his mother. Later during dinner, Fred compliments the meatloaf while Nancy complains about the missing earring. Fred declares that he is leaving for a medical conference in Frankenmuth tomorrow. This further upsets Nancy, but she is a timid and humble woman who doesn't make a fuss of things. Nancy teaches a cooking class at school the following morning. Later, she goes to her work buddy Dave, who is also a teacher. They walk together as Nancy vents about her home life. When school is over, Harry doesn't go home with his mom and instead convinces her to let him have a sleepover at his friend's house. With both Harry and Fred gone, Nancy ends up watching a movie all by herself. Later, she calls the hotel where Fred told her he'd be staying, but no one answers the phone in his room. With nothing left to do, she now starts rummaging through the house to find her lost earring yet again. She walks into the shed and starts observing the miniature town model. She doesn't find her earring, but her eye catches a suspicious box hidden under a table. She opens the box to find Polaroid films and a mystery envelope. Even though the family doesn't own a Polaroid camera, not thinking much, she simply puts the box back. The next morning, she is sewing up one of Fred's pants when she finds a parking ticket for a town named Madison. At this same time, Fred arrives home from his trip, so Nancy hides the parking ticket. Fred is in a positive mood as usual, but Nancy now gets suspicious. Fred has never told her about going to Madison. She goes on a walk with Dave after school and shares her concerns, thinking that her husband is cheating on her. They walk into the town's famous windmill as they continue to speculate. In the end, Dave reassures her as she opens up to him about her personal life, sharing that Fred rescued her from a terrible life and gave her a beautiful life in Holland. The thought of her husband cheating on her is something she can't fathom. At dinner that night, Fred announces yet again that he is going to a medical event next week in a town named Greenville. This time, however, he'll be gone for 3 days. Now truly upset, Nancy makes some snide remarks, but that changes nothing. At night, when Fred is asleep, Nancy sneaks into the shed and starts taking pictures of the mystery envelope. She hears some commotion from outside and goes to investigate with a hammer. Outside, she hears her son's voice calling from a distance. In her bedroom window, she sees Fred's silhouette as he is getting cozy with another woman. Now visibly upset, she drops the hammer and runs after Harry. When she finally catches up to him, he disappears into the bushes. She frantically runs around the empty town looking for her son while she starts hallucinating. She sees countless bodies on the road around her while the town continues to get smaller and smaller. She eventually wakes up in her bed, hyperventilating, implying that all of this was a nightmare. Back at school, Dave notices a student with a black eye and talks about it with Nancy during lunch. He thinks the father is hitting his son at home, so he called the Child Protective Services. During this conversation, we understand that Nancy and Dave are both reserved and shy people who have never done anything wrong or rebellious in life, which is why their friendship works. For the first time in their lives, they make a plan to do something adventurous. Together, they will break into Fred's office and look for clues regarding the parking ticket and the unused Polaroid film. Back at home, the father and son are working on the miniature again. Nancy shows up to announce that she will be going out of town on Friday with a friend named Gwen to do some shopping. During his appointment at Fred's clinic some days later, Dave is visibly nervous. While getting his eyes checked, he tells Fred about his teaching job at the local school. Fred asks if he knows his wife Nancy. To avoid any suspicion, Dave claims that they must be in different departments because he has never heard of her. Later, Dave asks if he can use the bathroom. With much difficulty and with a policeman banging on the door, Dave manages to mess up the window lock so Nancy can sneak in later. Now sweating profusely and feeling incredibly nervous, he doesn't complete his appointment and simply walks out of the clinic. The policeman follows him, and Dave thinks he is in trouble. It turns out, the policeman was also there for an appointment, and he was only following Dave to return his jacket, which he left in the bathroom. When he is back in his car, he gets startled by Nancy, who shows up in her detective outfit. Feeling jittery after the debacle at the clinic, Dave claims he is not going through with the plan. The two have a heart-to-heart conversation and end up making out for a brief moment. After a new spark is ignited between the two friends, Dave agrees to get back on the plan. On Friday night, they park the car far away from the clinic and walk to the back alley where the bathroom window is. Nancy climbs in while Dave stays back to keep watch. He wishes her luck as she starts her investigation. While she's fumbling with the locks at the clinic, Fred and Harry are having dinner at a local diner. He receives a message on his pager from patient, so he goes to make a phone call. On the phone, it is none other than Gwen, the friend Nancy claimed was taking her out of town for shopping. Gwen wants an emergency appointment for her young son, who has a contact lens stuck in his eye. Meanwhile, Nancy is snooping around the office, trying to find any evidence of her husband's supposed affair. Fred agrees to meet Gwen for an emergency visit in 10 minutes. Nancy is about to get in trouble. While she tries to unlock a hidden safe that she finds in the wall, Dave watches Gwen park her car outside the clinic and gets concerned. Inside, Nancy discovers secret credit cards and other weird things. Now, Fred also arrives and greets Gwen in the parking lot. As they are heading inside, Dave calls Nancy to alert her, but she is busy looking at all the odd things she has found. She finally finds a photo album with Polaroid pictures of random people's houses, as if Fred is a stalker of some sort. She finds a picture that says Lacey Ann for Bologna Queen, along with a picture of a woman. She finally picks up her phone and begins to panic. Fred starts the treatment in the operating room, while Nancy tries to find a way out of the office. Hearing the commotion, Fred goes to check if everything is all right. Nancy almost gets caught, but she manages to escape through a narrow window mere seconds before Fred opens the door. Dave and Nancy are now feeling ecstatic and overjoyed while they're driving away because their adventure was successful, or so they think. Back at the clinic, Fred brings up the shopping trip with Gwen, and she simply laughs and claims he must have misheard his wife since they had no such trip planned. Fred gets confused because he knows his obedient wife would never lie to him. Due to the newfound feelings between them, Nancy momentarily forgets about the weird stuff her husband is doing, and she starts making out with Dave on his couch. At the clinic, Fred goes back into his office to check and finds a broken piece of Nancy's bracelet, which further solidifies his doubts that his wife broke into his office. While Nancy and Dave are getting cozy, someone throws a carton of milk at his window. He goes outside to find that it is the student with the black eye and his father, whom he reported to the child services. While Nancy gets shocked by the onslaught of racial slurs being thrown at Dave, he faces them like a man and pulls the father to the ground. After chasing them off of his property, Dave comes back inside to Nancy, who is impressed at his sudden change of character. While Nancy is turned on and wants to go to the next step, he stops her and tells her that he doesn't want to settle as her man on the side. Feeling emotional after the racially charged attack, Dave claims that he wants someone to pick him first and give him a life of self-respect. And if Nancy wants to be with him, she will have to leave her husband and commit to Dave instead. Now feeling even more stressed, Nancy goes home and falls asleep on the sofa. Fred wakes her up the next morning and asks about the shopping trip. Nancy, who is completely unaware that Fred is onto her, lies and says it went great. Later that day, she calls the bank to inquire where Fred has been spending money with his secret credit cards. The lady on the phone says there was a $300 transaction at a jewelry store. She is now even more furious, thinking that Fred is buying expensive jewelry for his mistress. At the same time, she finds her missing earring in a jar of buttons and feels silly for having accused Candy earlier. She goes into her bedroom and finds a big gift box lying on her bed. She reluctantly opens it to find an expensive vintage jewelry box, implying that this is what Fred bought with his credit card for $300. Inside, Nancy finds a missing piece of bracelet that she accidentally dropped at Fred's office. While she's processing all of this, Fred suddenly walks in and starts saying cryptic things. He claims that he has created a safe space for his wife and son in his home. He isn't going to ask questions about why Nancy was in his office, but he simply needs her to let things go and trust him. Nancy, being the loyal housewife that she is, simply lets down her guard and agrees to everything, without thinking even for a moment that Fred is manipulating her. She gets teary-eyed and promises to trust Fred from now on. We now understand that Nancy truly values her family life in Holland, and she will do anything to protect her marriage. Fred understands this weakness and continues to use it to his advantage. After this incident, Nancy and Dave take some time away from each other and don't talk, even during the break at school. One night, while sitting alone in her car, Nancy finally decides to call Dave during a moment of weakness. With tears falling down her face, she says she is ready to leave her cheating husband. She is truly willing to let go of her safe yet unfulfilling and boring married life and start a new chapter of her life with Dave. Dave claims that this might not be so easy, as she has a chance of losing Harry's custody in the divorce. She needs solid proof that her husband is cheating, so Dave offers to follow Fred to Greenville for his 3-day trip and take pictures of him with his mistress. Even though the plan is risky, Nancy's curiosity is piqued, and she agrees to go along with him. The following morning, Nancy drops Fred off at the train station and heads to the school with Harry. She gets one to take Harry home for a sleepover and drives to Fred's hotel with Dave. In the hotel parking lot, they try to stay incognito as they witness Fred getting in his car. They follow him to a store where he comes out with some mystery bags and puts them in his car. Back at the hotel, Nancy sends Dave into the lobby to spy on Fred and get his room number. He texts her the room number and calls her to let her know that Fred is headed to the bar. Nancy tells the receptionist that she is Fred's wife and she needs his room key. Dave tries to keep Fred occupied at the bar while Nancy goes up the elevator and enters Fred's room. She rummages through the plastic bag to find even more weird items, which only makes matters worse. Among these things, she finds handcuffs, dog treats, and brand new men's underwear. She takes pictures of everything in a hurry while Fred begins to leave the bar. Dave calls Nancy to alert her that Fred is on his way. She is leaving just as Fred's elevator opens into the hallway. She quickly manages to hide next to an exit door while Fred makes his way into the room. To make matters worse, her phone starts ringing and Fred recognizes the ringtone. As he ominously makes his way towards Nancy, she manages to flee through the stair exit. Making her way outside, she is out of breath as she shows Dave the pictures in their car. Instead of getting answers, she is now more confused and angry than ever before. She thinks he is into some very weird things that he's been doing secretly throughout all the years of their marriage. Dave doesn't know what to say, so he kisses her to give her some comfort. They spend the night together in their car and wake up next to each other the following morning. While Nancy goes back home on the train, Dave stays back to take more pictures for evidence. During the train ride, Nancy can't stop thinking about Fred's miniature model of Holland. She goes back home and looks at it with a magnifying glass and finds the phrase Lacey Ann for Bologna Queen written on one of the miniature houses. She had found the real picture of this house earlier when she had broken into Fred's office. Still not truly understanding what her creepy husband is up to, she starts doing some research of her own. She uncovers Lacey's identity through an internet search and also finds her number in the yellow pages. Upon calling, a man tells her that Lacey has been missing for 3 years, and people assume she was unalived by someone. Meanwhile in Greenville, Fred gets out of the hotel and leaves in his car, which alerts Dave as he starts to follow him. Nancy compares the house in Lacey's picture to the miniature, and it happens to be an exact replica of the woman's house. Next to the house, Nancy sees a sign that says Fisher. She goes through the blueprints of the miniature houses and finds a list of zip codes in the back. One of the zip codes matches the zip code on the parking ticket she found earlier in Fred's pants. As the mystery finally begins to unfold, Nancy goes to the library and opens old archived newspapers on the computer while Dave continues to follow Fred around in Greenville. As Dave starts taking pictures of Fred entering a woman's house deep in the woods, Nancy finds reports of unsolved unalivings at every zip code that she found earlier. Everything finally makes sense to Nancy, and she understands that Fred's crime is something much bigger than infidelity. Fred targets innocent women just like Nancy and unalives them in the most horrific ways possible. But that is not where it stops. To take joy in his crimes and commemorate them like a sick fuggo, he creates hyper-realistic miniatures of the crime locations. Nancy calls to drop this bombshell on Dave, but he has left his phone in the car while he is actively sneaking into the woman's home. Hoping to catch Fred in an intimate act with his mistress, Dave is completely unaware of the gruesome scenes that await him. Once inside, he witnesses the woman's dogs chowing down on the dog treats that they found earlier in Fred's hotel room. Bypassing the dogs, he begins to enter the bedroom with the camera filming everything. Through a gap in the door, he witnesses Fred brutally unaliving the woman with a knife. While he is shocked, he stays silent as a ghost and continues to film. As a floorboard creaks under his feet, Fred sees him and instantly attacks him with the same knife. An intense fight ensues as they topple over the furniture and land on the living room floor. Dave struggles to pick up the knife at first, but he eventually stabs Fred and manages to run out of the house. The enraged criminal runs after him, and they both end up taking a nasty fall off the front deck. Dave gets up and makes a run towards the lake while Fred continues to run after him with a knife still stuck in his body. While Dave is trying to untie the boat in his panic state, Fred catches up to him and kicks him in the back. Not knowing what to do, Fred pulls the knife out of his body, and it causes him to collapse and drown in the lake. Thinking that he is gone for good, Dave flees the scene. The next day, Nancy is in the shed on the cusp of a panic attack while looking at the miniature. Dave shows up and tells Nancy that all of her research is accurate. Fred indeed is a serial criminal who has never been caught. However, he is too scared to reveal the true story. So he makes up the lie that he confronted Fred and threatened to expose him to the police, which caused Fred to flee the town forever. Claiming that he is never coming back, he reassures Nancy that she and Harry are totally safe. While Dave suggests they should all leave town together, Nancy claims a sudden disappearance would cause more questions among the locals. They should simply keep Fred's crimes hidden and live a normal life until Holland's annual tulip harvest. After that, the three of them can take a long vacation together. Despite everything that has unfolded, Nancy is still grasping on to her simple and charming life in the beautiful town of Holland. Over the next days, we see that Nancy is trying to live a normal life, but the secret is eating away at her on the inside. While she's constantly in a state of panic in every social scenario, Dave is also seen crying in his car. He keeps having nightmares about the scene of the crime, so he goes out and digs up a gun that he had buried in his yard. Sometime later, all of the townspeople have gathered to witness a fun parade that Harry is also taking part in. Gwen spots Nancy in the crowd and calls her over to sit with her. While making small talk with Gwen and her husband, she makes an excuse that Fred is still away on his business trip. However, Gwen claims she saw him earlier today waiting for the parade to start. Nancy also spots Dave standing on the other side of the road. While Harry and other students perform a dance number about their wooden shoes, Nancy catches a glimpse of Fred in the crowd. Feeling that he might hurt her or try to kidnap Harry, she leaves her seat to look for him just as the performance ends. Dave witnesses Fred hugging Harry, so he starts slowly walking up to him with a gun. Nancy also arrives on the scene, but Fred is gone within seconds, and seeing that Dave has a gun, Nancy gets even more scared. She takes Harry and drives away in her car. Instead of going home, she drives to a motel and starts closing all the curtains once she is inside with Harry. Dave shows up at the door and pleads with Nancy to let him inside. He confesses the truth and tells Nancy what he actually witnessed that night. Now feeling that she can't fully trust him, she reluctantly lets him inside. He apologizes for lying and tries to call the police to confess everything. Still trying to protect her seemingly picture-perfect life, she snatches the phone away from Dave. In an attempt to get it back, he falls on the ground and a heavy TV falls on his head, causing him to get injured. She goes to get some help, but finds that Harry is not in the room where she left him. When she goes outside looking for him, she finds him standing at the lake shore talking to Fred. He sends Harry to the car and starts manipulating Nancy again. He claims he kept her safe from all of this mess, but she crossed the line and found everything out, and now they have no option but to work as a team. Meanwhile, Nancy is too scared to utter even a single word. He threatens her to get back in the car so they can go home and resume their normal life together. In the car, Nancy tries to create a distraction so she can escape. She forces him to stop the car and yells at Harry to make a run for it. While Harry escapes, she points the gun at him that she secretly took from Dave's pocket. Fred starts acting all innocent and claims that their life will be ruined without him. When the sweet talking doesn't work, he smacks Nancy and she ends up firing a bullet. Hearing the gunfire, Harry runs back towards the car. It turns out that the bullet only grazed Fred's ear and he is still alive. He starts attacking Nancy with full force as she struggles to escape his grip. While he pushes Harry away, Nancy grabs one of Harry's wooden shoes from the back seat and smacks Fred in the head till he is gone for good. She takes Harry and runs back inside the motel to look for Dave, but he is nowhere to be seen. The scene now cuts back to the opening when Nancy was having her picture taken. She narrates her picture-perfect life as we see scenes of the miniature town yet again. However, this time, instead of mentioning Fred, she mentions that it is Dave whom she is spending a good life with. In the miniature set, we see Fred's figurine disappearing as the movie comes to an end. To watch more awesome and thought-provoking movie recaps, please subscribe to Film Guy Recaps. Don't forget to like this video and tell us in the comments which movie you want to see next. Goodbye for now.